What's up, good people? Welcome back to the channel today for another review, as Zero and I are finally getting ready to review the new film Pray for the Devil, which is coming to theaters October 28th. Now, the reason I really held on to that finally thing, because you may have heard of this film in terms of recent promotion and advertisement and trailers and whatnot, but we've had our eyes set on this film for a long time, to the point that when we were looking for this film, it wasn't even called this. Originally, this film was called The Devil's Light. And as we cover a lot of horror festivals, it was slated to be at one festival, which I cannot remember which one it was. I'm guessing it was either Fantasia or Fantastic. It could have been Tribeca. I'm not sure. And then it just disappeared. And then I was just like, where is this film? And the reason why, obviously, in the height of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to be available, when something was going to be released. When this was originally going to be released January 8th, 2021, then got pushed a whole year back to February 11th, 2022, to now finally getting released in October 28th, 2022. And I remember earlier this year, I was like, oh, finally it's getting ready to release. And I can't remember what else released in February, but I remember saying like, wow, there's a lot of horror films getting ready to drop in February, and then it just disappeared again. I was just like, I know I'm not tripping, but finally the film Pray for the Devil, newly titled, is releasing in theaters October 28th. And I will say one thing, due to the test of time, I thought the film still held up well. I'm pretty sure this film had been done for about 3 years now. And I thought it was, still to this day, the story that they wanted to tell, the visuals, and the everything with it, I thought it held up really well, even if this film was done last year and was released this year. So, nothing to worry about there, because there are films sometimes that are held so long that you're like, well, that felt like that's a little too late, too long, too late. So there's that. And quickly, I want to definitely say rest in peace to Ben Cross. So I noticed this character, Cardinal Matthews, in this film, and I said, that guy looks hella familiar. Ben Cross is an actor well known for playing Spock, Father Sarek, Ambassador Sarek, in the Star Trek franchise. And he had died 10 days after he finished wrapping his part for this film. So when you see him in the film, you obviously you're going to notice the face. And for a moment, I was like, God, who is that? And then finally looking at it, I was like, there we go. So, he was able to leave an impact on this film 10 days after he finished filming, dying. That's which crazy. Is sad. But I talked a lot, so I'm gonna give you a chance here to get in here and let's break this film down. What did we watch?
Right. So this film follows our protagonist is a young girl, or a young woman named Annie, who unfortunately is being followed by a lot of family trauma, which initially is introduced to us as mental illness, as maybe, I think it was schizophrenia, which we then learn was something a little bit more. And now she reaches to God's light, right, to try to solve those internal feelings and trauma and past guilt. And unfortunately, it's not really a thing for women to become exorcists or to be professionally trained from the church, the Catholic Church, in order to perform an exorcism. But there's a first for everything, right?
Yeah. Sister Anne, played by Jacqueline Byers, like you said, when introduced in this film, definitely shows that she had a rough childhood with her mother. Her mother had suffered from mental health issues. She was abusive, and as you said, it ends up being a lot more. In this case, she has been attached yet possessed by a demonic, a demon, and this demon has been a big handprint into Sister Anne's life, to the point that she recognizes it later down in her life and in her career, because she is a nun. And as Zero said, nuns do not perform exorcism. They're not trained. It's just not a thing. Nuns are basically there from a nursing capacity, and they also try to educate patients so that they don't fall into a situation where their exorcism has to be performed. But we see her being very ambitious. She she kind of sneaks into class and tries to be a fly on the wall to kind of consume this information and knowledge, because it's not like an act of rebellion, but because it's so prominent to what she endured as a child. And this is her sort of, trying to weave through all of this trauma that she's been through. And, this demon cost her a lot, her relationship with her mother, some trauma that she's kind of carrying on, and other little things that kind of, proceed in her young adult life. So this was something that she was kind of trying to do ambitiously. But what happens in one visit up with a patient is that this demon shows face again years later, and she's very familiar with this demon, and in the sense of like she recognizes like this is what I dealt with my mother. And upon this, which I love that they did not gaslight this. Not that I think that this was the movie that would do it, but I guess, like, just from seeing Smile and whatnot, when a woman or just anybody, our antagonist, a protagonist, excuse me, is occurring with something supernatural, then it's always like, I don't believe that. But I'm glad that we didn't even go down that route. It was instantly that they saw her on cam with her patient, and they quickly assessed it. You had a nun, and then you had a priest, and they both looked at it and they said, oh, this is interesting. And here's the dilemma in this film. What's so special about Sister Anne is that typically, not that I have like priest training or any type of exorcism training or not, disclaimer, but it is traditionally, done with the word, with scripture, with some form of a ritual or rites. You know what I mean? She happens to have the ability, to me, that comes off more as a spirit and more of like a physical thing, where they saw her handle sort of a pseudo exorcism by just being by this demonic presence, which everybody was like, whoa, she has an ability. And her ability isn't something we're going to say supernatural. It's very much like just the organic thing. It's almost theoretical at a point, saying like she's a good person, so she's able to fight these things off, sort of. But like, since that was the case of them observing how she was able to handle this demon that attacked her for no reason, as they said, oh, she's special, we're going to make an exemption for her. She's technically not going to be trained as a priest. She's not going to be trained as learn the rites of the exorcism, but she will have like a sort of a shadowing program where she will exist there, and we're just going to keep going on about our learnings. And I love the quote, which I did not write, by the professor who's played by Colin Salmon, who basically said, the Vatican is burning, the walls are down, we have a woman in our class.
Yep. I did like that one. That was good. I loved him in Resident Evil. I was like, oh,
yes,
my God.
So that's sort of like the thing with Sister Anne, is that, everyone talks about the relationship with God, but they easily recognize that she must have some relationship with the devil, why she's able to have a situation like this, and without even and even in certain scenes of this film where they're teaching different priests in training, or priests that are in exorcism training, and they put them right in the trenches, and they're just like, listen, somebody hold a cross, somebody read the script, go do what you got to do. And she comes in there with like this sort of like mothering, nurturing nature to her, and it works to an extent. It's not completely controlled, and it's not fully fleshed out, trained, but there's signs of what she does is completely untraditional, unheard of, but it works. And now she becomes sort of this crash and testing, or what was it called, crash and testing, whatever. She becomes like a test subject for them, to saying like, this may be a new path for us going forward. And the film definitely builds up the fact that like there has been more and more exorcism over the years. This is why they started to open up schools outside of Rome. This school happens to be in Boston. This is St. Michael's Institute. And she is, the first woman to be put into the class of learning the rites to exorcism. So there's, I think, so
I'm not usually the one. All right, so I'm not big on slasher movies. I'm also not big on exorcism movies.
I know that.
Give or take a few, they've never been my spiel, just because they seem, I mean, this might be a little stupid to say, but a little preachy, you
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
But when I saw this trailer when I went to go see Crimes of the Future in the theater, and I was like, okay, there's something different about this film that has attracted me to it. And after screening, I think I know what it is, and it mixed with a bunch of things that you just said that I would also like to comment on. But in a very weird way, this is a good for her, what we call good for her movie, you know, like revenge or like
Hmm.
promising young woman, but in the form of an exorcism movie. And so I mean I love a good for her, we all do, and it's formulated in a way where you're rooting for the protagonist, who her fault is that she, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, minus the specific vehicle of, you know, the devil and exorcism and all that, her specific fault is that she's a woman, in which we see in all these types of movies that are very sexually charged, but this was void of it and just talking about ability. And to comment on what you said about trauma, so this is like a thing that we're living through right now. Horror is like in love with trauma right now. We are
Hmm.
so in love with it, and this it was a great comparison with Smile. When we just watched Smile, there's a lot of gaslighting going on in that film, and when we typically see good for her type films, that goes like hand in hand with gaslighting, because that's something that many women deal with in their day-to-day life that is super relatable, that will make your audience of women and men be like, good for her, she needs what she deserves. But here, even though this is really kind of a good for her film, we don't get any of that gaslighting. In fact, we use the very thing that's supposed to put a woman underneath all these priests who are in exorcist training. That is kind of like her crutch. It's mentioned in the beginning of the film from another nun, a sister, that, you know, this is the woman's place as the nurse role. We are supposed to show mercy and empathy, and that is the role of a woman. And it's so cool how the tables turn, and the very thing that makes a more successful exorcism is that, you know, for lack of better terms, that womanly quality of showing mercy and empathy is what's able to get the job done even quicker. So for some reason, this kind of reads to me as like an elevated good for her, even though she's going against the systemic
Norms.
rules, yeah, the systemic norm that says you can't do this, but never once is she combated from her peers that
Yeah.
say, this is what makes you less and this is why you can't do this. For some reason
Yeah.
here the scripts are flipped, which is
Yeah.
so cool. And
Yeah.
it held up. I got a little bit, just like a taste of it from the trailer, but I loved it even more after watching the film.
Yeah, they completely enable her to be as great as she's destined to be. To be honest, when you really look at this film, it's a superhero origin story.
I was thinking that too.
It really is. I mean, they talk about her having powers. I mean, the fact that like evil is always around her. And this reminds me of her. And that's the thing. I just want to quickly jump ahead and say that I'm already looking forward to a sequel, because now that she could sort of establish this world, her powers, her assertiveness into all of this. And obviously they done set the world to a bigger scope, letting folks know like, hey, things are getting crazy in Rome. That's why we had to open up schools in other places. This is Boston. Where else might she go? Now that
Hmm.
she's able to do, now that she's starting to craft her skills a little bit, because she crashed and burned. That's the word I was looking for earlier. She crashes and
Yeah.
burns a few times in this film. There's an incident where she meets Father Dante, played by Christian Navarro, who I was happy to see in this, where, you know, he had a lot of faith in something that she could do. And much like any film that's dealing with exorcism, there's always going to be an unauthorized exorcism. It
Yeah.
never goes well.
Yeah.
Not a spoiler. It's 100%. It never goes well. And it
Hmm.
was a case of her still testing and crafting her skills. And now that she's learning and coming into terms with them, now that she sort of have come to terms with her trauma, let's see what she goes for. If you didn't know no better, especially from the first two acts of this film, because I'll talk about the third act in a second, this is definitely a superhero origin story of Sister
Totally.
Anne who's going to go out there and fight evil. I mean, you could put her in any universe. You say, listen, she has the abilities to fight, the darkest demonic
Mhm.
people or spirits, all the way to physical beings. Like, she's going to do it all, and all these folks that's kind of been around her have been enabling her because all they ever spoke about is she can
Mhm.
do this, all these positive words of affirmation of who she will destined to become. Yeah, they did land the landscape of saying that nuns don't do these things, but they never said that she shouldn't.
Yeah.
And the moment that they introduced the fact that she could, they was like, well, I guess this, goes against everything we do, but okay, hell, as they said, the Vatican is up in smoke, the walls are down. We have a
Yep.
woman in our class. It was amazing. I want to talk a little bit about the horror aspect of this as well.
Mhm.
I thought there were some gross moments. I thought there was one particular moment where anything with the eyes is like a I'm closing my eyes for me type of thing. The
No.
reflex.
It's like,
Yeah, there's an
what?
eye moment in this. There's some jump scares. A part of the film is really dark. And could be on my own behalf. I don't know, it's part of dark. But I will say that the third act of this film, if you came into this film and you're getting into a film dealing with exorcism, God, the devil's in the title. So God knows that you know exactly what you're getting into. The third act
Mhm.
definitely gives you all of those tropes. You get the body contortions, you get the skeleton bone crushing sounds.
Mhm.
You get in the what's the correct term for it? Like the double voices. You getting all of
Oh,
that.
yeah. Mhm.
You're getting all of those things that you would expect to get. And to the point that, like, the resolution of the film isn't entirely strong to me, because I keep going back to the idea that this feels like an origin story. Like, you
Mhm.
don't need this to shut the book and say it's over. You just need this to say chapter 1 is over, we're going to chapter 2. And that's kind of how I felt with it. Like, slightly underwhelmed in terms of the closure of this film, but completely optimistic on things they want to do for it. I thought nothing overly jumped out at me in this film being spectacular and things, but I think that the optimism in terms of what they possibly can do going forward is good. I think
Mhm.
they really, really built up this character enough to say, like, well, if she's all that, especially with the last scene of the film, you're like, well, she all that, and things are happening, then what's she gonna do about it?
Mhm. Yep. So
so
what you gonna do?
so my so I can finish talking is that my overall assessment of the film is that, like, I really did not love it. I definitely didn't hate it, and I'm not going to say it's in the middle. It's definitely like a strong 7.5 ish for me in terms of, like, nothing was wrong with the film. I don't think anything was wrong. It wasn't
Mhm.
it wasn't over the top with CGI. Had a good cast. It wasn't it didn't have a big budget. It's an independent film. It told a good story. It grabbed my attention the entire time. There's a very interesting revelation slash plot twist that I did not necessarily see coming. If you
It was a
said you
good one.
did, you're thinking after the fact. There's no way you saw the things connecting the way it did, but the way they made it work, I thought was really dope. And then I just thought, like, you made us care about our protagonist the entire time. That's
Mhm.
what a horror film is to me. I don't care about anything else if I don't care about the main person that you introduced to us.
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
so yeah, I didn't love it, didn't hate it. About 7.5, and definitely think that if this sounds of interest, if you check it out, and then hopefully we'll see where they go going forward. What
Mhm.
about you?
I think I'm somewhere around the same realm as you. This is definitely not my favorite release of 2022. Um, if I were to place this in some subgenres underneath the umbrella of horror, I would say this would be a very strong, like, dark drama origin story, with very obviously very, very heavy horror elements. But the fear is not what drives this movie, and I was kind of okay with that. It wasn't over the top at all. Again, we got all of the norms, the cliches that we're expecting that come from an exorcist movie, or exorcism, not the exorcist, from an exorcism movie, but I really don't think that that's what it was about. I really think it was the story that drives this whole film, and not the how scared can I make my viewers right now. I think that the CG was, like, just enough,
Yep.
just enough to bring us into the world here and not enough to leave us out like this is not believable in terms of what an exorcism actually
Yep.
looks like. But I thought it was enough. I also think that the layout of the events is a little bit unconventional when it comes to horror movies, because usually you leave a lot to imagine until somewhere between the halfway point and the last third of the movie. But we got some weird shit. Okay, we got some weird stuff very early on in the film, which is a little bit unconventional, but I think that was to set the scene, not necessarily to scare you. There was a couple jump scares, but I think they were just, part of the atmosphere, and
Yep.
again, not much of a how scared can I make my viewers. But at the end of the day, this is a very, very dark horror drama.
Yep.
And I can appreciate that for what it is, even though I can't say that I was quaking in my boots on the couch, but was I rooting for the main character, and did I want her to do well and see where this story led her? Because the stakes are very high. As a nun who wants to become an exorcist, I was invested. So, it did what it did for me. And again, I would hope that we could get to see some of Annie's adventures in the future, because now she has the skill that she worked for the past hour and a half of me sitting on the couch invested. So I want to know what she can really do.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, Najir, you and I have seen so many mediocre exorcism films. So
Yeah.
something new and fresh like this, as a comeback would be cool to see. If
Yeah.
not, then I appreciate the story for what it was, and I will definitely put this in my letterbox list of good for her horror that you should probably be hip to.
Quick few other notes I just want to say. This was by the director Daniel Stam, who in 2010 did The Last Exorcism. So yeah, guy has a thing for exorcism, as we see.
Yeah.
um yeah, and again, fantastic job. I think for his slate of films, he's been this is probably his fourth film I believe he's directed. I thought this was definitely a step forward from his previous film. The last film he recently did was 13 Sins, which was in 2014. So get to have him back putting out some horror content. I just want to a quick nods to the cast. Poser Taylor, who plays Natalie, the young lady in this film, definitely takes us on a ride of different things. I'm always like, I don't want to give anything away about this character, but I gotta say that her performance is got to be. I just don't know if I would have the courage at that age to read a script and say you have to do these things and you just nail it. So I thought Posey did a fantastic job. As I brought up Colin earlier as Father Quinn. Colin is, Resident Evil franchise. This is a person that we've seen for a long time, even in some of the James Bond's film. I think he's such a big name, and for him to sort of take a little step back and let these other folks shine, that just shows you the professionalism of some of these actors who's been around for a while. But I got to say, every time he talks, you listen. He
Yep,
got some.
that's
He
for
got
damn
some
sure.
gems in here.
Yep.
Yeah, his script is done amazingly. And then, as I mentioned, Ben Cross is in there. Virginia Madison as Dr. Peters. Christian
Oh
Navarro.
yeah, I totally forgot. That was like
Mm-hmm.
the first
Mm-hmm.
thing that I said to myself was screen this. Oh, we know
Yeah.
her. We love her.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Horror
And Christian, obviously from the popular Netflix series 13 Reasons Why. So I can't wait to see him in a lot more things. So it was cool to kind of see him in this. Christian, we're talking about Candyman there. You got some OGs in here, you know what I mean? So I appreciate the symbol of the cast. But I think the only other thing I can say is that you mentioned something about CGI. There's an ambulance scene where they do use a little bit of CGI in there.
Yeah.
I thought that was done really well. Again, not over the top, not completely low budget, just right in the middle where it just looks really good, really practical, and easily to digest. And when you consider the exorcism aspect of this and the demon contortionist and all that other good stuff, I thought all of that looked pretty solid. I thought the first one that they kind of showed, I was just like, but eventually, there was another scene. I was like, okay, cool. We're good. We're good. So I'm interested to see more of Sister Anne and Jacqueline Byers. Maybe we can get praying for the devil too, or pray for the devil too. However they want to remix the name or something. I would love to see where that goes, because
First,
clearly,
she's pray for the devil. Now
yeah.
you should actually pray for the devil, because he's gonna need some help after he's released in the world.
That's actually really good. That's actually really good. That's really good. See, that's why you good at what you do. Because the devil wants to be, as we heard numerous times in this film, let me in. I was like, all right, that's getting creepy now.
Yeah.
But if folks, check this out. And really quick. Oh, this is the last thing I was gonna say. This was originally going to be slated in February of this year. It would have came out around the same time as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's where I was like, oh, they're coming out pretty hard with some of these horror films. But you know, there's no better place than coming out on Halloween, folks. So
yeah,
that's where you can check it out this weekend. Jump in the comments, folks, when you do. Let us know your thoughts about this film. Would you like to see a sequel? I cannot come off of the idea that this feels like a superhero origin story. There's definitely some folks I could just say like, oh, this reminds me of this character. I'll let you do all the connections there as you see it. But like, I definitely could see this going somewhere, and that would be very, very interesting. So jump in the comments, let us know your thoughts about this when you check it out. And thank you so much for watching this review, folks, and we'll see you back around very soon for many